I'm Liz Constable from Book Art Studios, and I'm here at Lake House Arts today to take you through some really simple steps on how to dye paper in coffee and how to make a simple notebook. I'm going to be taking some steps out of one of my books, DIY Notebooks Made Easy. And the made easy part really means it's made easy, because there's nothing worse than being in a situation where you're just getting into something and you haven't got what you need, the vital ingredient or materials. I really like to make things as simple as possible for people so that you can just say, oh, I've got some instant coffee, or, you know, I could do that. I've got some photocopy paper. And so I can show you how quickly and easily it is just to put something like this together. So here's the book. We will be doing a notebook from the book called, I suppose I should have been a bit more prepared, Notebooks So Simple to Make by Hand. That's what we're aiming for. Just before I get started, I'll just give you some lovely examples of some kind of notebooks and journals that I make. Obviously, the more time you spend on this, the more energy you put in, the more you get involved, the more exciting and interesting they can become. And this just gives you a little hint, a little tease in terms of what you can do with notebooks going into making books by hand. And the course that I will be running through Lake House Arts, making a book with a hardcover, will be something like this. And we'll be talking about the design, how to put a book together, what to do for the pages inside, and of course, binding the book as well. So it's fair to say I'm a little bit obsessed and passionate about making books. So let's get started, should we? The first thing we're going to do is we're going to make up a brew of coffee. Now, I'm often asked why coffee as opposed to tea. Now, excuse the pun, but one thing about coffee is it is instant, obviously, and it smells pretty nice. But you don't have to wait a long time. Literally, you mix up the coffee and the hot water and you're good to go. With tea, you have to leave it a little bit longer. And also, this lasts a lot longer. With tea, after a couple of days, it goes a little bit slimy on the top. You don't tend to get that with coffee. Now, I'm just going to start off with a measurement, but you can adjust it. If you want your paper to be darker, you put in more coffee. If you want it to be lighter, then you put more hot water in. So as a rule of thumb, I'm just going to put a couple of heaped tablespoons of instant coffee, okay? Any brand will do, but not percolated coffee, because that will just sit on the top of your paper. It's kind of a bit grainy. It won't sink into the paper. And then roughly, I'm just going to put about 500 mils of hot water, and I'm just going to move that out of the way. Just give it a bit of a mix and we're good to go. Now, I'm feeling like I'll just put an extra tablespoon in, and the reason for that is I want it quite a bit darker so that when I put the mixture onto the paper, you'll actually see it more clearly. There are several ways you can dye paper with coffee, but this is really the easiest way. Give yourself lots of space, get lots of old towels out. Any old brush will do. Obviously, if it's quite a wide brush, then you've got lots of, it will cover a bigger space more quickly. And all I'm going to do is just paint it on. And then turning it over and painting the other side. And that is how you just dye a piece of paper with coffee. Now you can leave it like this and just let it dry, or you can just have any, an old tea towel, an old face cloth, anything like that, and just damp it dry if you want to. And on a lovely sunny day, just put them outside in the sun, and before you know it, you've got lots and lots of coffee dyed paper. This is just bog standard photocopy paper, and I deliberately decided to use that today so that you can see how easy it is to make a notebook with what you've probably already got lying around. And here are some I did earlier. I have to say that, don't I? And you can see that when they dried, they kind of dried a little bit mottily. And, you know, it's given it some texture as well. If you don't want that, then just give it more of a smooth covering with your brush when you're doing that. And sometimes it has a lot to do with the towel that you're drying it on as well. So I shall just move that and put it to one side. And what I will do next, oh, now let me just show you this. This is actually a piece of graph paper from an exercise book. Can you see the lovely lines? These are beautiful when they're dyed in coffee. Absolutely gorgeous. So we're going to be working with that as the cover. If you've got children or grandchildren and they're coming near the end of their exercise books, especially in New Zealand, we're going to be going into a new school year. Often they haven't used the whole entire book. So it's really good to go through and just rip out some of those pages because they make great covers for notebooks especially. And yes, it is paper. You can use card if you like. So for example, this is a divider out of, office supplies, because you'll see the little number on the side. They make fantastic covers. So again, just using whatever you have lying around. So I'm going to fold my papers now. I'm starting with A5 size, and I just want 5 sheets. So here we go. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I'll discard those. I'm going to fold them over. I'll just move that so that you can see what I'm doing. There you go. I'm going to fold this over, and ideally, in an ideal world, if you have a bone folder, then this is really, really great for going along the edge of your paper and making a nice sharp fold. But again, if you're just starting out, you'll say, what else can I use? Literally a bread knife, not a bread knife, sorry, a butter knife from the kitchen, and that will work just as well. So you do that with all of your pages, or even your fingernail. So if you haven't got a bone folder, your fingernail or a knife, or even a metal ruler, any of those things work really well. So just 2 more. And because it's lightweight paper, you can actually fold 2 at a time if you want to. And there you go. Now we need to cut these in half because the size of the notebook that we're making is going to be A6. And I'm just going to use my knife here. So going along, holding the paper down flat, turning it over and coming in from the other side. And you can experiment with different, and I'll just put 3 in because again, it's light paper, so I can do that. You can experiment with different knives. If you've got a bread knife, if you want a nice jaggedy look. See if I've got one handy. No, so we'll stick to this. But the more jagged the teeth are on your knife, the more jaggedy the edge will be on your paper as well. Right, so now we just need to fold these in half. And again, we can do it with a couple at a time. So just making sure that they're nicely lined up, folding them over and using the knife, giving them a nice crisp edge. And this is going to be a really lovely notebook that will fit in an A4 size envelope, the kind of thing that you can just make really easily and pop in an envelope to a friend, and it won't cost a lot because it will be relatively light and easy to post and delight someone at the other end. And if you wanted to as well, you can just use a piece of graph paper in coffee as wrapping paper. So lots and lots of good uses there. Okay, so I have got all of my pages here, and I'm going to put them inside each other. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So now, remember, we cut them in half, we folded them over, and now we have an A-sized set of pages. All right. The next thing to do is to create a cover around the book. My piece of graph paper is a little bit too big, so I'm just going to put my pages on the inside and then just literally turn this over and cut with the knife again, just to measure it out. If at any point you need to use or want to measure things out with a ruler and use a pencil and templates and do whatever it takes for you to make this easy to work with. And then I'm just flipping it over. So really I've just folded it and folded it so that it's the same size as the cover, as the pages. And on one side, it's not as clear, the little graphs, the lines are not as clear. So I'm going to turn it over for the cover so that they're more prominent. And I'll pop that on. So quite quickly, especially if you die a whole lot of paper and you have it in stock and you just want to quickly make up a notebook, you know, how quickly did I do that? And don't throw away these little bits. Always keep them. They can be sewn in, they can be glued in, you can make them into little pockets, you could turn it into a bookmark. There's lots of uses for these, and I have a studio full of them, absolutely full of them. Do we have any questions?
No,
not at the moment. If you have any questions, please do ask. I've got a lovely lady next to me who's monitoring it all. So if you've got a question, do feel free to ask and I can answer that for you. Now, we're going to get into the binding of the notebook. And there's lots of different ways in which you can bind notebooks. Some, you know, more is complex than others. And this I wanted to show you this way because I just want to show you how easy it is to make a template to make the holes for binding. So what we want to do here is, with our piece of paper, just photocopy paper, I'm simply going to fold it in half and then just cut it. And again, you could cut that with a pair of scissors. If you are more confident with scissors, just use whatever you like to work with. Now, I'll fold this in half. It doesn't matter about the width for this template. It doesn't matter about the width. It's more that it is the same length when you open your notebook. So do you see, it's literally the same size as the pages. And now I'm just taking a little bit of that off because we don't need that extra bit. So you could cut it with a knife and a ruler. That's all we want. We just want this little bit like this. So you know very obviously that it's a template. And what we want to do is we want to measure out the holes here. Now, honestly, don't let this put you off. If you think that's too overwhelming, I can't do that, just stick a couple of holes in, get something sharp and pointy and stick 2 holes in and just literally tie it together. Never let anything like that put you off. Say, oh, now it's going into the too hard basket. Find a way around, work at your own comfort level that keeps you creating. Because the thing is about creating, as long as you're creating and having fun, it doesn't matter what it looks like, it doesn't matter what the outcome is. The main thing is that you are enjoying what you're doing. And also with something like this, you might decide that making notebooks isn't your thing, but you might decide it is. And this is a really good way of finding that out. I now have my template. I'm going to fold it in half like that. And then I'm going to fold it in half again like that. And then I'm going to fold it one more time. So it looks like this at this point. But when you open it out, you'll see that it has very clearly fold lines. And those fold lines have very cleverly and easily done the work for you by giving you the spacing. And all we need to do is put a dot where the 2 lines join, and that gives us nice equal spacing for where our holes need to go. Honestly, I've been making books for over 20 years and I still use this system. Even if I'm making books, like this with lots of sections or signatures in, I still refer to that method to this day. My goal is just to make it as easy as possible for people when they're creating. Now, the thing about making holes in the book, the best thing you could ever have if you're going to do this do it on a regular basis, is make yourself a cradle, either out of wood or card. So I made this at my woodworking class and it's just brilliant. But again, before you say, oh, but I haven't got one of those, I'll show you an alternative. Now, most people will have a copy, oh, maybe you won't these days. It doesn't have to be the yellow pages, it can be an old book. But what you want to do is just open it out, preferably kind of in the middle. So it just gives you some support. It gives you something to hold the book open in the middle while you're making the holes. So just to recap, I have my pages and I've got my cover. I'm going to pop it into the yellow pages like that. I'm going to put my template in and line it up. So you want it lined up so that it sits perfectly in the middle. Then everywhere where there's a dot, you want to put a hole. So using my awl, and I'll come back to this in a minute and give you some other options as to what else you could use. I'm just going to push and wiggle. And the wiggle part is actually quite important because what it's doing is it's making sure that when you come to the binding stage, that hole is ready for the needle and the thread to go through. You don't really want to be doing that when you're in the middle of binding. So there are my holes, all nicely lined up and spaced and ready for binding. If you don't have an awl, And I have a selection of awls for different purposes in the binding process. If you don't have an awl, first of all, you can actually just find something long and pointy. So I think some of the crocheting tools might even do that, but even a cork and a needle, and literally just stick it in the cork and poke the holes. Now it's not ideal, and you know, obviously you might lose the needle, but initially to get started, you can do it like that. Right, so we'll get rid of this because we don't need that anymore. And now we want to bind the book together. I thought that some red thread would be good because then you can see what I'm doing. I usually use linen thread, and that's because I make a lot of books, and I make books with more than one signature. So a signature is a group of pages. Now at the moment we're only working with one, but with a book like this, you've actually got several signatures or sections, depends what you want to call them. So that's one, and that's another one, and so on. And you can see how many there are by the binding on the outside. And because I do a lot of those kind of books, I work with linen thread. And linen thread's really good because it doesn't end up sagging. Embroidery threads can, you know, they don't quite keep the tautness how you want it. But for notebooks like this, you can absolutely use embroidery thread or whatever you've got in. You could even use cotton, but just, you know, make it a little bit thicker. Right, oh, where's my needle?
Could you use ribbon?
You could use ribbon. You can, you'd need a needle with a big eye if you wanted to put ribbon in. And also you'd need to make your holes a little bit larger to get it through. And definitely if you're only putting 2 holes in or something like that. Right, so let's begin the binding process. I'm just going to start at the top, and I'm going to take my needle through the very first hole at the top. And you'll notice I haven't put a knot in it. And I'm just giving myself a little tail there that goes down to about the 4th hole there. Turning it over and going through the next hole on the outside. Just pulling that through. So if you've done any kind of sewing where you go in and out of the holes, that's literally what you're doing here. So I'm now on the outside again. So it's outside to inside, and then inside to outside, and it just get that nice rhythm. So I mean, if it was fabric, you'd be sewing right now, but because this is paper, you're binding. But effectively, you're doing the same technique. So now we've come to the end, but I'm actually going to go back, and this is what it looks like so far. Let's see if you can see that. There you go. This is what it looks like at this stage. And now what we're going to do is just go back to the top. So repeat the same thing, but we're heading back to where we started. And with anything, with art, but especially with making books, notebooks, there's so many variations. And if you decide to do something differently along the way, but the book still holds together, then do it. You know, make up your own binding. I encourage you to experiment and explore. So now we've come back to the top. We've come back to where we started. And this is what it looks like on the outside. This is what it looks like on the inside, and I'm just going to just fasten that off. Now, if you know how to do a slip knot, that's brilliant. And if you don't, it doesn't matter. Literally just tie it in a knot. Slip knots are good because it keeps it nice and taut. But if you can't do that, then just tie it in a normal knot, which is what I'm doing here. And give yourself lots of thread. So for a notebook like this, let's see, I would say give yourself about 2.5 lengths of the notebook, okay, as a general rule. So now just to recap, we've dyed the paper in coffee, we've dyed the cover in coffee, and we've cut the paper in half and we've bound it together. You know, what fun, what joy. Well, it is for me anyway. And now what we want to do is just add something a little bit jaunty on the cover. So let's see what we've got here. And I've got a beautiful set of stamps that I bought on a trip to Scotland a few years ago. And let's see what we've got in here. I've got this jaunty little boat stamp. I think we'll use that. So I'm going to, oh, sorry, I'll do it that way. I'm just going to put 3 on the cover, because most artists you'll find work with odd numbers. It's kind of more pleasing to the eye. So you'd either put 1 on or 3, but not 2 or 4. And it just, to me, I didn't actually know that artists did that. It always felt right to me to do that. And now what I'm going to do, just to mix it up a little bit, is I'm going to cut that middle one out. And I try and use whatever I've got lying around. I don't tend to buy a lot of fancy equipment, and you know, I try and keep it simple where I can. So I'm going to use the lid off the glue to draw around, because it's just the right size. Now you could draw around with a pencil and then just cut it out, but I'm going to use my awl to score. So holding down on the lid, I'm just scoring around the paper like this, the image that I want to cut out, making sure that I've pressed hard enough. I've got a cutting mat. If you haven't got a cutting mat, use the kitchen cutting board. And so here's my image now on the inside. I'll just poke that out. Put that to one side. So you'll see there's a little gap here now. So what do you think I'm going to do next? I'm going to put another image on the inside, so that when you open the book, it's on the first page. So this is just showing you how playful you can be with your covers. And with this one, we're just going to glue it, put a little bit of glue on, and a glue stick's a really handy item to have around, especially for something like this. Just going to peel that off and then pop it on the back, so that you've got your image on there as well. Really playful, really, really easy to work with. And so that is how you make a notebook, from using using instant coffee, photocopy paper, whatever thread you might have in, using basic equipment that you've probably got lying around the house, and just utilizing whatever you've got to work with to make it happen. And there you've got a notebook.
done.
You all right for?
I reckon
Perfect.
that is the session, eh?
Excellent. And if you have any
Wow.
questions, please do
How amazing.
ask. Oh,
Any
you
questions
stopped.
in the comments?
Oh, questions?
On the outside.
Oh,
No questions.
no questions. Well, I have a question.
Yes.
You may have said this earlier in the session, but I was wondering, how did you come to doing notebooks? What started your journey?
Are we still?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Still going.
Right. Okay. I didn't realise that. Put the glasses back on so I can see. Sorry. What was your question?
So, what was the start of your journey towards making notebooks?
Oh, I met someone who I went to a women's group breakfast, and this lady, Ailey Snow, produced a book, and it was like love at first sight, and that was it. I just had to learn how to make books, and starting with a notebook is brilliant because it's a nice lead-in to books, and you know, it's a way of testing out to see whether that's your thing and that's what you enjoy. And certainly I knew as soon as I made one that wasn't enough. I wanted to do more.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, that was a great session. Thanks,
Thank
Liz.
you.
And
Made a big mess on your table.
so we're going to wrap that session up now. And if you want to join Liz's class, which will start in mid-March, go to the website www.lakehousearts.org.nz and find our Learn Online tab, and you'll be able to see all the classes that are available there. We really appreciate you coming in and your time and the wonderful art that you make, Liz. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you very much.